What is up, everybody? Welcome in to the final preseason episode of Shout a Buffalo Bills Football Podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, you can pair your favorite craft burger with your favorite craft beer by heading over to Tops. Tops has the perfect burger and beer pairing guide for you. Topsmarkets.com/burgers and beers. Whether you are soaking up the final days of summer or grilling out before the football game, Tops has everything for everyone. Tops has everything you need to make the perfect burger beer combination. Check these combos out on the website. Cobb salad burger pairs well with a wheat beer. Monster Munster burger pairs well with a Belgian Pale Ale. Pizza turkey burger pairs well with a amber ale, and a blue cheese chipotle burger pairs well with the brown ale. Head over to topsmarkets.com/burgers and beer. All right, Ryan, we got a lot to get to in a shortened episode. We're going to go about 30 minutes today. A lot to get to, previewing this game here coming up on Saturday, getting into what we've heard, what we've seen in the last couple of days in Orchard Park. How are you, my friend?
Hey, I am doing great. And like you said, our last preseason show of the summer here, it's winding down. We're getting close to final roster decisions, and that's where this game really comes in big.
Yes, I'm actually sending out a text message to the Shout Insider text line to let them all know that we're live. I haven't gotten to it because we've been rushing around here. I just put up the event page. You could see it in the description on YouTube and over on all the audio platforms for our next live event, Ryan. We are so excited for this one. It is the grand opening of the Shout podcast at the new Wingnuts on Millersport Highway, the new Wingnuts, the old Santoras. We're going to go live there 6 p.m. The start of the event, Saturday, September 16th, the day before the home opener. I cannot wait.
Yeah, the atmosphere is going to be electric. New home of Wingnuts. I cannot wait, Matt. They've been promoting their wings on social media. I can't wait to get there and, have our normal 10 or so.
Yes, the address is 1402 Millersport Highway in Amherst. Come out and see us September 16th. The link to the event page is in the description. If you go over and RSVP on Facebook, you'll get a weekly reminder and a reminder right before the event. I'm going to get this text message out to our insiders. If you want to become an insider, text us at 716-528-6727 or hit me up in my DMs, email me, mparrino@nyup.com. I've been in a giving mood this week. I've been giving out 1 month free trial. So if you want to get one of those, let's get that going. All right. I want to start with the Bill. Let's start with Connor McGovern. I already see a question about him, and this is a very interesting development. Yesterday, Connor McGovern left practice with a knee injury, had a full leg wrap put on, came off the field, seemed like he was doing okay. He was not a participant in practice today, Ryan, and Sean McDermott was asked about that beforehand, and he said it's too early to tell like how serious this is to kind of figure out a timeline. So right now, Connor McGovern out of the mix. Really bad timing with the opener here coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, definitely, bad timing in terms of the severity. You never know. I know he told another Buffalo reporter post-practice he wasn't too concerned with the injury, but the fact that he's out today, the fact that Sean McDermott kind of said, we don't know the extent of it. Sometimes you might think you're okay, and then you get some testing done. So you kind of have to wait and see here. Bad timing because the Bills have been really trying to gel this first team offensive line. He's been obviously in the mix next to Deion Dawkins all summer. Getting used to that, having Mitch Morse next to him. So, depending on the severity of the injury, Matt, they got to kind of figure out what's next for them. Is it David Edwards? Is it Ryan Bates? Is it someone that we're not considering? I think those are the two popular names, the most realistic names personally, but the timing obviously is not ideal with week one right around the corner.
Right. And you don't want to overreact to this. I think it would maybe if it was a little bit more serious, you'd have a quicker kind of timeline or status report. You might get a week-to-week designation on Connor McGovern. So we'll kind of play that by ear. But in the meantime, talking about some of the options behind him, this is why they went out and got a veteran like David Edwards to bolster their interior offensive line depth. You mentioned Ryan Bates. It definitely seems like they're trending in a direction where Osiris Torrance is going to win that right guard job. So if that's the case, now you have options over there at left guard, to your point. And I think Ryan Bates, going back a couple years, Ryan, some people thought he might be better served to play left guard when he was forced back over to the right side with Roger Saffold in the mix. So they're going to probably throw a lot of different things out there on Saturday. They are going to play the starters, and we can kind of pivot off of that a little bit into that conversation. But I think it's also provides maybe an opportunity for a guy that hasn't had a lot this summer, and that's Ike Butker, a guy that they know very, very well. He's now kind of been dropped down in the depth chart order and, trying to work his way back. But when you got guys like Bates, Edwards, who started in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, you signed McGovern to the big deal, you drafted Torrance, there's just a lot of pieces in front of him. And even a guy like Nick Broker, Ryan, they spent a 7th-round draft pick on him this year. Ike Butker is a former UDFA. He started for them. They know what he can do, but it's almost in a lot of ways like Ike Butker is kind of fighting Nick Broker, maybe even for that practice squad spot.
Yeah, that's just it. This team has so much depth right now in terms of the interior of the line. So, talking about the injury to McGovern, whatever it may be, I think the Bills are in a good spot there in terms of making sure that they have other options. But you're right, it knocks some of these other guys that have been regular depth players for this team into a spot where Saturday's game is big for them. It's a big game for an Ike Butker who has a lot of starts under his belt, a lot of reps under his belt, practice reps, this, that, and the other. So, the Bills do have a lot of depth, at least at that spot. So you feel good about it, depending on the severity of this injury. You're hoping McGovern's it's a day-to-day type of designation. We'll learn more about that here, I'm sure, in the near future. But the Bills are at least in a good spot there. And then, like you said, not only are they deep in terms of their 53-man roster, they have some serious options like Nick Broker and Ike Butker possibly for their practice squad. So that is definitely a position of strength if there was one positive to take out of this.
So it's going to be good on good, Ryan. Bears starters will play on Saturday versus the Bills. They don't know how many snaps it's going to be, but Justin Fields will play. Josh Allen and the Bills starters will also play. So we're going to get a chance to see one more litmus test, if you will, for this start. Now, on the defensive side of things, Tremaine Edmonds has actually been out of practice for a couple weeks for the Bears, I read about today. And so I don't know if we'll get a chance to see Josh Allen go up against the guy that he was drafted in the same round of the same draft with. I mean, that would have been a kind of a fun storyline. But let's get into the starters playing and what that means, because Sean was asked about that today, and he said, listen, from preseason, it's a different approach. It depends on where you're at when these games are being played. And he said that right now, the best thing for this team is for the starters to go out and play a couple more snaps. And I think coming off of a week where you have 12 first half penalties, I mean, I don't know if you want to flip that forward and go into the opener against the Jets with that bad taste in your mouth. As good of a week of practice as I think that they had. I mean, it was a little shaky on Tuesday, but I thought Wednesday was maybe the most put together, high tempo, operationally sound, productive practice the Bills have had maybe all summer, Ryan.
Yeah, and you said it, the bad taste in the mouth. Not so much even the execution or the fact that they couldn't necessarily put up some points with that first team. It was the penalties, the pre-snap penalties, the undisciplined penalties. Sean McDermott wants to probably get that cleaned up before the regular season and getting the starters out there. He did not say how long they were going to play, so it could be one series or two series. It could be an entire quarter. It might just kind of go with the flow of the game and how effective they look. If Josh Allen and company come out and they march down the field for 75 yards and a touchdown, they could call it a day. If they struggle and have those penalty issues, it could be longer than that. But it's good to kind of finish the preseason on a high note. And you mentioned Sean McDermott saying every year it's a little bit different. For every team, it's a little bit different. You look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and the fact that he's generally playing in the preseason every year. Bills fans are, rightfully concerned about injuries that could take place, but the same kind of injuries can happen in a regular season too. The Bills kind of have to just go out there, put their best guys on the field, try to execute in this last preseason game to end on a high note, feel good about rolling into week one against the Jets on the road.
Yeah, and I think that you want to be at a place where you also give your players some confidence going into the regular season. Like to go in, forget like the bad taste in your mouth or the look, the way that it looked. Like you want to be able to go into week one and like you're converting at a high level, not only in practice, but when it means something. And I almost feel like you almost want to run them out there against the Bears because defensively, I don't know if that's as good of a group as you faced a week ago in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So maybe the opportunity to develop some confidence flipping forward into the next week. All right, where do you want to go next, Ryan? Because I texted out, almost said I tweeted out to the insiders. If you have any questions, let us know. If you want to become an insider, text us 716-528-6727.
Yeah, I think maybe we go next to who has the most to gain or lose on Saturday in this game, Matt.
I like it. Let's start with the most to gain, and I will bring up Andy Isabella. And I think that you might be sitting there saying, well, hasn't he already gained a lot already? And I do think that he has gained a lot. I think he's turned this into a really interesting situation on the other side of this game when the Bills have to figure out, do you keep 6 receivers? Do you keep Isabella over Justin Shorter or over a Khalil Shakir, 2 guys that you've invested draft capital in, 5th-round draft picks in consecutive years? Or do you risk it? And although he's a kind of fun story, brings a little bit of energy into the room, has made some plays. I think his quickness, his elusiveness, it's, tangible. Do you just try to get him to the practice squad as a vested veteran, handshake kind of deal, saying, listen, we want to get you guys into the mix, but we want to get you into the mix, but we also have a numbers problem. And, you like what you've seen here. Like a lot of veterans come over to Buffalo and kind of like the offense playing with Josh Allen and just say, hey, man, just keep learning the system, keep performing in practice, wait for your opportunity, and you'll go from there. Maybe he had such a good training camp preseason that somebody comes calling and he gets an opportunity, he wants to go see that out. But I think that if he has another big game, no matter if it's in Buffalo or elsewhere, Ryan, big opportunity for Andy Isabella.
Yeah, huge game and opportunity for Isabella. We've already talked about the fact that he came in during training camp, made a quick first impression, has really worked his way up the depth chart, has been used on special teams as a gunner and on returns. They're utilizing him in multiple ways, which obviously helps his chances of making this roster or being a part of this team in 2023. And, you mentioned the fact that he is a vested veteran. He doesn't have to go through the waivers after cut downs. So the Bills could have, a handshake deal saying we're cutting you now so we can get some procedural moves done, moving guys to the injured reserve, getting them on certain lists, and then we can re-sign you or we can sign you to our practice squad and we'll elevate you. We want to get you out there. It's an interesting dilemma because, they could go with 5, 6, or 7 receivers, depending on how the other positions kind of shake out. But Isabella's done so much in such a short time that, he deserves a tip of the cap, so to speak, to even have himself in this conversation. For me, Matt,
let me just before you go to the next one, I just wanted to kind of shoehorn one thing note into this one. And it's somebody that would also be in this category of like something to gain. Khalil Shakir hasn't practiced all week. He's dealing with some rib soreness. And I think that comes at a really bad time. But on the same token, what you have in the player. This is a developmental player that, did some things last year, came into the spring and the summer with high expectations. And I don't know if it's necessarily materialized. Something interesting, Ryan, like, Khalil Shakir was part of a draft class when Chad Hall was the wide receivers coach. Now with Adam Henry, I wonder if that puts any additional pressure on Shakir, because it's like you got Isabella who comes in here, learns everything really quickly, seems to be operating really comfortably in the offense. And then you have Shakir who's kind of been up and down. You wonder what Adam Henry is saying, his observations of Shakir, and what it could mean if he's not able to play on Saturday. It's rib soreness. Maybe he gets to a place where he can. But again, I would have put him in this category, somebody with a lot to gain, but he may not play.
Yeah, that's just it when it comes to Shakir. And great point on not being one of Henry's guys. And, Henry was part of this new coaching regime. They bring in Shorter via the draft. I'm sure that he had a voice and bring in Isabella. Not quite the same as drafting a player, but interesting to note nonetheless. So as much as I've been high on Shakir, and I think that there's a lot of upside there, this was a 5th-round pick from 1 year ago. It wasn't an early day 2 pick or anything like that. And you mentioned new wide receivers coach, so that could all factor into the decision making. But for me, like I was saying on the other side of the ball, I'm going to go with some of these defensive ends, Matt, especially now that we know the starters are playing. And you're going to get some of these reserve guys in. The Shaq Lawsons, the Boogie Bashams, the AJ Epinesses of this team. All 3 of those players specifically have a lot riding on this game. Because when you look at this roster, Greg Rousseau is going to be playing a big role starting for this team. You're going to have Leonard Floyd. And then, oh, by the way, the last few days, Von Miller seems to be hinting perhaps at getting closer. The fact that he's wearing some pads now, the fact that he's wearing the helmet at practice, maybe much ado about nothing. He's still on the PUP list for now. But it sure feels like his return is going to happen sooner rather than later. So you whether it's 4 weeks after the regular season or whether it's sooner than that, there's 3 guys that you're already invested in for this season to play a big role. Now you have 3 other guys who have been, 2 of them were more recent draft picks of this regime. Lawson was obviously a former draft pick of this regime too, left for a while and came back. But I think they're fighting, all 3 of them, for maybe 1 or 2 spots. And it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Are any of them, put out there for potential trade bait? Can they get any of them to the practice squad? I think they have a log jam at defensive end, and it's going to be hard to keep all of those players on this roster.
Indeed. Question here from our good buddy Rick Rarick. Mike Vick asking, was Mike Vick at Bills practice today? He was, and he got to actually break down the team after practice. They did a big wide team huddle. Vick was talking to the players. I think Quentin Morris mentioned that, just about like finding your motivation, finding your, a little bit of a motivational speech ahead of a really important game coming up in a couple of days for a lot of these, bubble roster players. I mean, Quentin Morris, you think that he's kind of like a lock to make the team. And listen, I loved hearing from him today. Every time I've had a conversation with him, he's been great. But there's a scenario, Ryan, that they can go with just the 2 tight ends. I don't think that that's the case, only because if one of those guys gets dinged, you want to make sure that you have somebody that is able to move into that role, and Quentin Morris plays special teams. So I think he's pretty safe. But, crazier things have happened, and knowing how much Knox and Kincaid are going to play, that could be something that's pretty interesting. But Vic, coming off the field, it was like you would have thought Justin Bieber walked into that thing. All of the Bills players after the team huddle were trying to get pictures with Mike Vick. I mean, really an icon back in the day. I mean, Quentin Morris was talking about playing with him in Madden, and I mentioned to him, like, that's kind of cool. Like, you played with Mike Vick all those years ago as like this dominant Madden player, and now the next generation of kids that might be in your shoes someday are playing with Josh Allen in the same kind of way, like kind of like a cheat code type of thing. One of the reasons why he got that Madden cover. It was a pretty cool afternoon.
Yeah, and that's, I'm sure, a surreal experience for those players. Like you said, he was kind of like a video game cheat code. He was one of those players that you would go onto YouTube and watch his highlights from college and the pros. So even if some of these younger players didn't get to see him play in his career or get to play those older Madden games, they're obviously very familiar with his game. And I'm sure that was kind of a cool moment for many of them, just in terms of Mike Vick, the football player.
Next up for most to gain. I want to get it. Well, before we do that, let's do a little bit more of the injury roundup, because it's going to be interesting how the Bills navigate the quarterback position. Josh Allen starting, in a way it's good, because otherwise Kyle Allen would probably have to play the whole game. Matt Barkley's dealing with an elbow injury. His availability for Saturday is very much up in the air. So you have that situation playing out. Could be a very heavy workload for Kyle Allen on Saturday. Jordan Mims at running back had some type of mouth situation happening in practice yesterday, where it was kind of towards the end of practice, didn't return, and then he missed practice today. So he's another guy. I mentioned Shakir. Obviously, McGovern is somebody that has been pretty banged up. Some guys kind of like banged up here, Ryan, going into a very important game for a lot of them.
Yeah, and the quarterback specifically with Barkley, if if they even think there's a chance he cannot play on Saturday, I'm surprised they didn't bring someone else in, because you want to at least, you don't want to, Josh Allen's not going to play more than a few series, obviously, but then you're only going to have one quarterback on this roster potentially. And, they've had a guy like Nick Tiano come in for workouts, played in those developmental leagues. I guess it's still something that could happen, but you want to safeguard yourself, protect yourself in this last preseason game, that you're not playing Kyle Allen too long if possible. But if Barkley can't go, that could definitely be the case, and you're putting your number 2 at risk for playing significant reps. So definitely something to monitor there with these other injuries.
Linebacker's a mess right now. Terrell Bernard still battling back from the hamstring. It seemed like a good sign yesterday that he had his uniform on, pads on, kind of like in a limited fashion, didn't do any of the team stuff, but then he missed practice today. So I am not hopeful that he'll be able to play on Saturday, nor am I hopeful that Dorian Williams, who's dealing with a calf issue, will be able to play either. And so now, everything that we've been talking about the last week or so with a very lackluster MLB competition, it gets really just thrown into the garbage, because you can't rep Dorian Williams when he can't practice, and you're not going to throw him out in a game without kind of reps. So we're on the road to Tyrell Dotson by default, or, in a worst case scenario, AJ Klein, which would really be depressing, I think, if you're Sean McDermott and the coaching staff, because everybody that you kind of vaulted into the spotlight in this competition, from Spector to Bernard to Dotson, even for a pinch back in the spring, Dorian Williams, none of the 4 will end up winning the job if they go in that direction. And I just think that could be a bit deflating.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Listen, it is, as much trust as they have in AJ Klein, if he wins this job, so be it. You just mentioned the fact that they went into the summer thinking, okay, it could be Tyrell Dotson, Terrell Bernard. We'll put Balin Spector in there for a minute. We draft Dorian Williams, and we kind of flip-flopped him a little bit. But now it's looking like it could end up being Dodson by default, who's had a very disappointing preseason, or AJ Klein, a player that, one, yes, he's been in the system for a few years now. He's very familiar with Sean McDermott from the course of his career, but he was sitting out there in free agency for some time before the Bills even brought him back into the mix. So, in their mind, I think they were probably thinking this is a depth piece. This is a veteran. This is someone that, worst case scenario in season we can have on this team or practice squad and elevate. And now here we are, just a few weeks away from the regular season, and he might be their week 1 starter. So, that competition has definitely been the most disappointing in terms of availability, in terms of how things could potentially be shaking out, because our true competition never really was able to take place during the preseason.
You know what wasn't disappointing, Ryan? A visit over to topsmarkets.com/burgers to visit Tops's world of burgers. With over 30 ready-to-grill burgers, Tops is the place to pick the juiciest, most delicious burgers in town. From beef and turkey to chicken and veggie, you'll find something for everyone. Taste the flavors of the world with unique toppings and twists on the classic burger. Top's world of burgers, yours to explore. All right, let's explore. We talked a little bit about middle linebacker, how things are trending in that direction towards probably Tyrell Dotson. CB2 is up for grabs on Saturday. And to me, that is the position that I am the most interested in. A little bit of a monkey wrench into this whole situation, in that Sean McDermott is going to play the starter. So does that mean Tre'Davious White goes out for a series of 2? Does that mean they go off of the beaten path and maybe interject a Christian Benford or Kyer Elam to start? Is that an indication that maybe one of those players is, vaulting himself up in the competition? To me, I've never been further from Kyer Elam is CB2 since last year ended than I am sitting here right now today. And what a bummer that is for Bills fans. And because, and for Kyer, who, listen, every time you hear him talk, like he sat down with John Scott. I just saw a clip of it. He put out a story on it yesterday, and you can hear the passion in his voice. You can hear how hard he's worked at this. And I think the real takeaway quote was that he never at a point in his life before the NFL did he ever have a hard time playing football. And that's what it's been for him. So now, what is the path forward if he doesn't win this job? Because I don't even know if he doesn't win this job, if he's going to be in a rotation. If they go rotation, it's probably going to be Dane and Christian Benford. And I don't know, Ryan, if you were asking me for who's my pick to win the job right now today, based on what I've seen over the last week and a half, I think I'm going Christian Benford.
And see, and you've been there every day at practice. I think Dane Jackson's been very stable at that job. So I wouldn't be shocked if he rolls out with the starters again on Saturday. And then, kind of by default is named that starting number 2 cornerback. But in either scenario, Matt, we have a situation where your 2022 first round pick is not even in the rotation possibly to play major reps this year. And that's a major problem. And we've had Bills fans in the comments here saying he's only 22. It's only his second season. I get it. He's young. But when you draft someone in the first round and they're not going to play major snaps in year 1 or year 2, that's a concern to me. That's a big problem for me. And I'm not sitting here saying they're going to trade him. They're going to move on from him. But at what point do you sit there and say, well, we draft him thinking we could develop him for this scheme, for this system. It just hasn't happened yet. For 2 years now, he's been outplayed by a player that we took in the same draft multiple rounds later. He hasn't really given Dane Jackson much of a threat. It's a problem. And to Kaiir Elam's credit, when he came in last year, Matt, in games, I thought he played well. I thought he handled himself well. But this team, this coaching staff and regime is really hesitant to give him significant reps. And we've seen bits and pieces as to why, with these penalties in the preseason, with the handsiness in training camp as well, where you have the offensive coordinator, Stephon Diggs, addressing it with you. We saw it last year. That's probably at the end of the day the biggest problem for him. But if he's not playing a major role here in year 2 after being a first-round pick a year ago, you're starting to enter that bust territory, at least when it comes to his role with the Bills.
Here's the thing on Kaiir too, that I'm seeing some comments about him maybe being a trade candidate. And the reason why I'd push back against that is because you never know how this thing is going to go. I mean, Dane Jackson went out in week 2 last year, which then puts you in a real bind. Like Kaiir Elam, even if he ends up being 4th on the depth chart, if there's one single, Trey White's coming off still that knee injury 2 years ago, right? Like what happens if he misses some time? And then you have to move Dane, if he wins the job, or Benford into that CB1 role. And maybe you need, Kaiir Elam to be your first guy off the bench. And maybe that kind of experience and maybe trial by fire unlocks him to a degree. So I don't necessarily think that if he doesn't win the job, like it's over. I do agree. Like he's very young. He's still learning the scheme. I think there's going to be a level of disappointment. But he said he grew a lot as a person from last year to this year, like compartmentalizing, like not having the success that he probably thought he was going to have in year 1. And so I'm not saying this is a closed door, move on type of situation. They traded up to get him. I don't know if you want to now move off of that player. I mean, go back to Cody Ford, Ryan. Traded up for him, albeit in the second round. They didn't get off of him until, was it year 4? Was it his contract year?
Yeah, I believe it was, because then they moved him moved on from him. So you're right. Those are all great, valid points. And let me also just say that Elam's been an outstanding teammate. He's just goes in every day, puts his head down, does his job. He's taking everything in stride. And maybe it is still a level of comfort with this system that he's trying to kind of acclimate to, where Benford and Dane Jackson had more experience with it in college. And then obviously early on in the pros, in the case of Benford in the last few years for Jackson.
I did see some comments about Isaiah Simmons early in. I know Bills fans are like, trade for a linebacker, trade for any linebacker. The thing with Simmons is he's probably closer to safety at this point in his career than he is to middle linebacker. I'm not sure necessarily that would have been a fit.
No, 7th round pick for the Giants, so that's a good get for them. But he is pretty much a safety at this point in his career. He did not work out well at linebacker in Arizona. And for a Bills team where you're 4 deep already at safety, that doesn't make much sense. But if you're looking for any kind of caveat, Matt, it tells you that the Arizona Cardinals are open for business. This is a team that's probably rebuilding, and oddly enough, somehow, some way, they have like the deepest tackle room in the NFL with taking a top 10 pick in Paris, having another outstanding starter there. But so now you have Josh Jones and you have Kelvin Beachum as your reserves. And one, I'm not sure they would trade both, but one or both could be on the move. They're not going to risk cutting either of them, and they could probably get a day 3 pick in return, maybe a player and a pick. So Arizona is at least open for business, it sounds like.
Yes, indeed. We're open for business. You just got to text us 716-528-6727. 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month after that. Become a Shout Bills insider on the text line. If you're really feeling froggy, DM me on Twitter, direct message, send me a note, say I want the 1 month free, or email me, mparino@nyup.com, and I will give you a special code that gives you 1 month free. It's a great deal, right?
Yeah, can't beat it. We are enjoying these interactions every single day with the Bills Mafia. We definitely have our regulars that I know every time I open up that site, we're going to have a question or a comment from them. Always looking forward to it. Get in now, Bills Mafia.
Let's go one more. Who do you think has done a little bit of a slant on the question that we just covered here going into this Bears game? I think we covered, who we think has a lot to gain with a big performance. If there's any more you want to throw in there, feel free. Who's somebody that you think has locked things down? I'll start it out. And I think Ryan Vandermark is a guy that no matter what happens on Saturday, I think he's LT2 at this point. I think you want to put him in the game if something happens to Deion Dawkins. And I think that his level of play potentially there is better than anything else that you have on the roster currently. And so I think that puts him in the safe zone of no matter what. And I'm actually interested to see, like he said, like Sean McDermott said, starters are going to play. So they're probably going to want the continuity to send all the different players out there. But like, I'd actually like to see Vandermark get some like first team reps in this game just to see what it looks like. And if it looks the same against the first team players for the Bears.
Yeah, I love that. And I put out a 53-man roster projection, and I had him getting released off the roster if they made a trade, but I noted he would make it as their number 4 tackle if not. But I had some people saying, well, if they do make the trade, I would rather them keep Vandermark over Questenberry, which I love it. I love the pushback. I love the commentary.
I'm with them, Ryan. What are you thinking?
The youth part of it, the development part of it. I get it. I love it. Questenberry can play a little bit at guard too, but they're also very deep at that position. So love your choice of Ryan Vandermark. Trying to think, in terms of guys that have locked it up, I think Osiris Torrance has locked up the right guard competition, even though Sean McDermott won't come out and say as much. I think that when I'm looking over this roster, Quentin Morris, someone that you just mentioned in a previous segment, has locked down a roster spot. And you said the same thing. You think he's on it. I think he had an outstanding summer. I think he didn't probably get as many accolades or as much love because of how great Dalton Kincaid has been, knowing what you have in Dawson Knox. But if they're going to play as much 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets as I'm anticipating, you want to have a number 3 that's waiting in the wings. And you've also invested a lot in terms of the development of Quentin Morris, not so much from a draft perspective, but in developing him. And he has looked great all summer. So for me, he's someone that's locked something down as well for this team.
Shout out to Sheila Atkins, one of our regulars on the Shout Bills Insider text line. Love the interaction. He said, Ryan, I bet I'm the one you're referring to. We've had a lot of great dialogue. That's great stuff, man. I mean, it's really bringing us close together. We do these monthly live shows that also brings us closer to Bills fans. And this is a new avenue that's been really great. There's a comment in here I wanted to bring up, Ryan, quickly. Here's a thought. Trade Spencer Brown for whatever and replace him with a bag of potatoes. Josh will be safer behind the bag of potatoes. Well, if you are going to buy a bag of potatoes, head over to Tops right now. They got a 3-day sale right now. Thursday, August 24th, Friday, August 25th, and then Saturday, August 26th. 3 days only. 49 cents for a homegrown sliced cucumber. Pillsbury brownies, 99 cents for a box. Check this out, Ryan. I'm buzzing here. Get yourself a bag of the EL fudge cookies, $1.99. Can you find a better deal in town than that right now? That is the cookie of my childhood. 3 for $3. Chef Boyardee beef ravioli, $2.88. Bags of Doritos, the big bags, 88 cents for a 2-pack of elbow macaroni. Get over to Tops Friendly Markets right now. The next 3 days, these deals are wild.
Can't beat them, Matt.
Dude, I thought you were going to come in with some great takes on all those different opportunities
okay.
like that.
I grew up as a big EL fudge guy. Now let me ask you: was it just the standard ones with the elves and the chocolate in the middle, or did you like those rings with the
Yeah,
cookies? See, I
all
like
of
the
the
circular ring ones the
above.
most. That was my
Yes, I
go-to.
like those too, but I loved the EL fudge had two different flavors. You get the chocolate inside or the vanilla inside. And listen, I like to play a little EL fudge roulette. All right, I put them on the rim of my milk glass. I'd spin them, and whichever one fell in, boom, put the spoon in there. Take a little bite. It's awesome. One more person I want to talk about before we get out of here. AJ Epinesa. A lot of work to do on Saturday. And I don't know if I'm there yet. We talked about him being a cut candidate a couple weeks ago, and people were in their feelings about it. If they keep, I think they're going to keep 10, and I think Von's going to go on pup, but he is trending up. Are they going to keep 11? Are they going to cut Shaq Lawson? I think Shaq Lawson's been better than AJ Epinesa this summer. I think he was better than him last year.
Yeah.
What do you do? How much does he have to do on Saturday? I think a lot.
I think that he has been a player that has flashed at times. He had a few good practices over the summer. He had 6.5 sacks last year, but you go back and you rewatch some of the sacks, and they were, 20 seconds before halftime when a quarterback's just trying to make something happen, and breakdowns here and there. It just hasn't come together for him for whatever reason. And you look at Shaq Lawson, who post Von Miller's injury, and I get Russo is dealing with an injury to it at some point. I thought he was one of the more stable defensive ends after Von Miller's injury. And do you really want to move on from that just because you drafted this guy in Epinesa a few years ago in the second round? I don't know. I don't know if that's the way they're thinking right now. And you have Boogie Basham, another guy that has a lot to prove on Saturday, coming off of a nice performance, coming off of a strong preseason. But these are guys that you drafted in Epinesa and Basham to be impact players, and neither of them have come close to that to date. And now it's starting to get interesting with veterans like Shaq Lawson. And, Kingsley Jonathan didn't do enough this summer to push any of those guys off the roster, but he had a strong preseason game, and he's someone I anticipate being on the practice squad. So you have some young guys in the mix that you want to develop further. You have some older guys on this team that you want to find a role for, and all of a sudden you just have Epinesa and Basham kind of sitting there and like almost having to pick or choose one or the other hypothetically.
PJ, guy, buddy, friendo. Matt was way too excited about that fudge, LOL. Well, PJ, that sounds like somebody that's never had an EL fudge cookie, and that sounds like a you problem, my friend. I'm just kidding. That was a crazy segment. I'm sorry that I ate cookies back in the day with a spoon. I didn't like dipping my fingers in them. I listened to my mother, never put your fingers in your mouth. And if you put your fingers in the milk, then you're putting your fingers in your mouth because you're going to drink the milk and eat the cookies. Come on, guys. Like, let's just be sanitary, please. All right. He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. This is getting out of control. I am not going to be in Chicago this weekend. I had a couple of prior commitments that will not allow me to travel, but we will have you covered the same way we cover games from home all throughout COVID. So Ryan and I will be live after the game to break it all down. We'll see you on Saturday. Enjoy that last preseason game. Say goodbye to it as it goes away for another year. Take care, everybody.